Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Rival Recon here on Anfield Index Pro. And with the season just over 2 weeks away, on this pre-season edition of the pod, we'll be taking a look at just what shape the Big Six teams find themselves in as overseas tours wind to a close and Premier League games loom ever nearer. So to start us off, we're diving into last season's fourth place, Tottenham Hotspur, as Antonio Conte looks to remould Spurs into a steelier side that's able to close the gap on the teams above them whilst going deep in the Champions League. So joining me on the pod to lend us his insight, I'm delighted to welcome back Seb Stafford-Bloor from Tifo Football and The Athletic. Welcome back, Seb.
Thanks very much for having me, Harry.
No, yeah, good to speak. We're, sort of slowly easing myself back into the world of men's football, certainly. I've been enjoying watching the Women's Euros that's been going on over the past sort of few weeks or so, but very much after last season, I felt, despite doing no physical exercise on par with any of the players, I felt quite burnt out.
So, it felt like you'd done the running with them, right? Yeah.
I mean, I was, covering each and every game, and it's fun that a team can play in every single game they're able to play in, but actually, by the time we got towards the end of it, we felt it. It's been slowly as these pre-season tours have been winding on, and some hilarious reminders of some of the trophies that exist in these preseason tours as well, that I've been seeing online as sort of different teams make their way around different parts of the world, and you see sort of how appreciative the fans are to see them. But I wanted to dive into sort of looking at the top four and sort of doing this sort of rival series where we dive into just what shape the rivals are in, effectively. So want to start with sort of Tottenham, and of course, very strong finish to last season in the end. So when it mattered the most, the team secured some really big results. 4 wins out of the last 5 at sort of a crunch point to secure Champions League football. Amongst them, that draw at Anfield. I mean, I think we last spoke ahead of that game. That obviously proved pivotal in the end to sort of Liverpool falling just short of the title. That obviously wasn't the only reason, but really impressive performance. I mean, we can talk about that a little bit, but also an emphatic win over Arsenal as well in the North London derby, in a game that was being so hyped up as this big Champions League decider. Did come down to it, I suppose. In the end, it was very pivotal, and for Tottenham to have shown up and sort of dispatched Arsenal, who was sort of really running on fumes, it seemed like, towards the end of the season, in such a way. And then finish the season in such a strong way, grinding out the 1-0 win against Burnley, 5-0 emphatic win against Norwich on the final day. I suppose I just wanted to start there and ask you what you made to the end of the season, because I mean, plenty of points. It didn't look like that was going to be the case, that Spurs would actually secure Champions League football.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, I think that night at Anfield was really, really important, because I see the difference between Tottenham and Arsenal in that race for fourth. In the end, it became a kind of a psychological conflict. They went to Anfield. I thought they probably deserved to win that night. I know it finished 1-1, but I thought they played very, very well. Defended excellently, and were it not for that sort of deflected Diaz goal, they probably would have got home. But then if you look at the kind of the pattern of the season, I think Spurs managed to start getting results when they needed to. Anfield was a good example of that. Then you mentioned the Burnley game. They really didn't play very well against Burnley, but they won. And the Arsenal game was funny because it was, it's become this kind of sort of quasi-controversial fixture, whereas nothing controversial really happened that night. I mean, Arsenal gave away a stupid penalty. Arsenal player got himself sent off and they got battered. And I feel like the response to that and all the kind of the silliness that result bled into the defeat they suffered at Newcastle. And it was yes, Spurs did improve dramatically under Conte. They did play very, very well. But I think what I was left with was, at the end of the season, fantastic Champions League. But let's make sure that everybody realizes that Spurs are here because Arsenal collapsed and Spurs were able to take advantage of that. Whereas a better side, a more emotionally mature side, a team that could call on sort of greater depth probably would have beaten them into fifth. And so I entered summer thinking they really need to strengthen and get better. But it was very heartening. It was kind of it felt almost like a role reversal, because this is the kind of thing that used to happen to Tottenham at the hands of Arsenal. Like, they used to kind of, there's this great build up and this is the year and this is the year and we're so much better and this is improving. And then when it came down to it, at the moment where it actually mattered, they would fall away and they would do something silly, or they would produce a non-performance at a critical moment. And these are all things that happen to Arsenal beyond their defeat to Tottenham and to Newcastle. I mean, they got hammered by Palace. They lost at home to Brighton. Like, there are quite a few kind of Spursisms within the latter half of that season. So I hope that it would be contextualized and people would be sort of not, oh, well, we're back in the Champions League now, so don't really need to do any investing. Because top four, which I'm afraid at different points in the past has been the case and has been a mistake. But it was great, and I also look, I'm getting older, but I'm certainly not above enjoying a rival fan base absolutely lose their mind as a result of the disappointment, because it has been I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. Just the sort of the kind of the social media behaviours and the sort of the it's just broken them, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like I tried to stay out of quite a lot of it, to be honest, but Arsenal fans online are very, very interesting because
very energetic, should we say that? They internet hard, don't they?
Yeah, internet hard is a good way of saying it, because I always found it. I mean, again, didn't mean to be arrogant, didn't mean to be dismissive, but certainly, like some of the comments I was hearing ahead of like Liverpool's games with them early in the season, when they were in good form, like playing well. Some of the comments that I was hearing around, what was going to happen in those games and things like that, and I was just like, this is delusional. You're doing very well. I'm happy for you. Great, got loads of family who are Arsenal fans. But like, no, you may get a rude awakening if you really believe you're at a certain level, for example. And then I've got a lot of family in North London, and the WhatsApp always gets very lively ahead of those games. And just the radio silence on that WhatsApp chat for the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season. And then actually, just almost to prove the point, the next time I saw one of my uncles, who's a big Arsenal fan, was the day after the Champions League final. I went to a family party and just was there to see everybody. And before he even said, like, oh, hi, how you doing? The first thing he did was just laugh at me. And I was like, okay, well, there you go. Yeah. That's where we are, right? You're laughing at others for losing in a Champions League final. Okay, sure. But to your point, I think some examples there as to sort of why they weren't in the right position to handle what happened too well towards the end of the season.
It was funny though, because it was like, I mean, an honest assessment would be that
they improved.
They have got a lot better, and I think their general direction
is positive.
Is really positive. The trouble is that Arsenal are overcovered as a football team. Because I think the table would say, I think the table is truthful, and that they are probably the 5th best team in the country at the moment. Man United just being hopeless kind of muddled things a little, but because they're a London team, and because they were successful, they have had a very successful kind of Premier League era in relative terms. They're a little bit overcovered, and so what you have in that situation is these little improvements, which are very, very real. Like, I think I really like players like Saka and Smith Rowe. I think they're fantastic, and
Exactly.
I think I really like the Jesus signing. By the way, I think that's great, and Odegaard made a difference, and so there's loads of stuff. And Martinelli, Jurgen Klopp seems to like Martinelli a lot.
Yeah.
So there are these things. It's just that, and we're all guilty of this. I'm not picking on Arsenal fans, but like they went early with it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah,
the Ramsdale stuff as well. Like Ramsdale's a good goalkeeper. No, he's not an excellent one.
Yes.
He's a good goalkeeper. He reminds me a little bit of someone like Simon Mignolet.
That's the perfect comparison.
He'll make some brilliant saves, but he will have some bad moments. And I suppose also a bit of Chesney in him because he makes a lot of noise, does a lot of talking.
It's quite loud. Yeah.
And then there's an error at a bad moment, and it looks a little bit silly. But then that's fine. That's his personality, and I'd rather an aggressive goalkeeper than a docile one. But you end up when you do that, and what I've done myself, like you do end up looking a little bit silly, and you can have a bad summer.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think on the Ramsdale thing, it was a similar case. I remember receiving a message from one of my cousins about. Telling me about how Ramsdale was better than Alisson, and I just left it on. I just left. It was really early in the season, and I just left it. On red, and there was a point later in the season where I probably had a few too many, and I was looking at this DM and going, "Do I?" And I was like, "No, I don't." I'm in a better place. It's my younger cousin. I'm not gonna. He'll learn the same way I learned. Like these things happen. You can talk yourself into these places. But in terms of the end of the season, and you mentioned there, like kicking on, and I do want to get to talk about the players who've come in so far in the recruitment. But I think one thing that was sort of interesting when we spoke last time was there was a sort of a slight feeling of detachment to what was going on at Tottenham, just because there was that sense of uncertainty created by the lack of explicit commitment to the job that Conte was showing, because I think he wasn't sure. It seemed like he was going to get the backing that he felt that he needed to really take Spurs forward, and that obviously created sort of a level of detachment. He certainly got animated on the touchline. I thought certainly towards the end of the season, as it became clearer that Tottenham were going to secure Champions League football, he was fully bought in, and now he seems fully locked in. He's this 150 million supposed war chest that he's been given. Actually, I don't like using the phrase war chest, but he's been given the money by Daniel Levy, and we'll talk about some of the recruitment in a bit. But just wanted to ask you how you're feeling towards Conte now, that the fact that he does seem like he's invested into the project now. It's a full pre-season with the squad. It's going to be the first full season under Conte as well. Are you feeling a bit differently towards him?
Yeah, I mean, I still see him as quite a temporary figure in my fandom, because yes, he's there now and he's got the investment, but I don't see that as being a guarantee that he'll be there for longer than a year. But then that's okay, because I feel like that's the partnership we've entered into here, is that he is someone that will be quite transient, and at the same time, not every managerial era can be a kind of dynastic affair, a Pochettino situation, a Klopp situation. Like, you're not always going to have that connection. You're not always going to have a club that sort of builds itself up around a single figure and kind of adopts and acquires their personality. It's just, that's a really rare privilege. And I think it's always the way, though, isn't it? Like, when you look back on those times, you realize how special they were. It was a very, very, it was a wonderful time. But I'm enjoying the change he seems to have inspired. I think the kind of he's forced Daniel Levy to spend money thing is a little bit overdone. I just think that the club's financial situation has improved. Obviously, there's a lot of debt. There's a lot of kind of legacy of the pandemic years. At the same time, it's very, very fortunate that they built the new stadium when they did, because that is going to be a tremendous advantage going forward in terms of, like, obviously things like hosting non-footballing events and making money out of it, but also match day income is vast compared to what it used to be. So Conte was a factor in that, but not the only one. And I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the new season, which is I haven't done for a while, actually. Even after the even after the 2019 season, the Champions League final year, I wasn't hugely looking forward to the next year because I felt like the team had reached its apex about a year before, and I knew what was coming. But I feel like this time they've actually behaved like a little bit of an apex predator in the market. They're not Man City or Chelsea, I accept that, or Man United, but some of the behaviours are really encouraging, like taking really important players away from other Premier League teams feels like it feels very, I don't want to say statement of intent. It's a bit trite, but for instance, like I can't remember a time when Tottenham just said, yeah, we'll have a Richarlison. We'll take that from you, thank you. Everton will stamp on your head while you're drowning. That kind of thing. And it's been a bit, it's been different. But then again, like you see also kind of the speed of the recruitment, which is unusual. Like it's very weird to be in, what is it today? We're recording this on Sunday, so it's 17th of July. And the season starts a little bit earlier, so we're actually only like 2.5 weeks away. But everything's kind of done. I mean, there are probably a couple of players that they could do with bringing in, but everything's pretty much, all their needs have been done. We're not in a situation where, well, we'll start the season and we'll, take maybe 3 points out of 9, and then, on the final hours of the transfer window, then we'll see what's going. It's like, no, we need a right wing back, we need a left wing back, we need a backup forward, and we need a new centre half, and we need another midfielder, and they've done it all. I mean, Jed Spence hasn't been announced yet, but that's been completed. And they've done everything, which is kind of weird. I don't know how to respond to that. And it's all pretty good. Like, it's a mix of like, I think Spence is a little bit of a punt. I think he's a good player. I don't know how good he can be. But like, if you look at like a Perisic, can you imagine what that guy was like in his prime?
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus. He's just a killer, isn't he? Like he's a player you want. He's a competitor. He's won everything really at club level, not international level, but just a really, really good footballer. I don't care how old he is. He's just an excellent guy to have around.
I was going to say, from a mentality perspective, to have someone like that in the dressing room alongside Conte, I feel like Conte would almost bring him in just for that. This guy's still got a lot to offer on the pitch, but he could be my general in that dressing room.
He could play on my team any day, even Perisic. And I think that's it's indicative of the kind of player that they wouldn't have signed in previous eras, because yes, he came on a free transfer, but no doubt there's a considerable impact on wages, because he would have been a very desired player, a very coveted player across Europe. So you mix him in with Richarlison, who is he's a good player. I mean, I feel like there's still room for improvement there. And I tell you what, I always hated playing against him. Like I can say this now because he's a Spurs player, but it just like he's such an antagonizing, provocative player. And I feel like I've always felt like he goes to ground far too easily. But then I suppose, fine, if you have that kind of player on your team, you don't necessarily endorse the way he plays all the time, but it's better to have that type than I feel like Spurs have had too many nice players in the past, like too many players that I like him, he's great, isn't he? Like okay, but I want a few more of our guys to be hated in the kind of Eric Lamela way, right? So that's great. Longley's a loan, but I feel like he's a bit of a reclamation project. I saw him have some pretty difficult times at Barcelona. So that's a player that needs to be rebuilt. But then, it's a depth signing. It's an area that needed improving, specifically the left side of that three-man defence. And Bissouma's a really good player. Look, I mean, I'll be honest, when it happened, because it happened before he was cleared of the charges that were still out against him, I didn't really think of it in a football sense. I was kind of, I don't know, like football's not always the most important thing. And now that he's been cleared and now there's no case to answer for him, that's fantastic. And you can focus on what he does in a footballing perspective. I just thought that I found it confusing that it was announced and that there was no sort of, I understand. Yeah, it's a difficult situation legally because he wasn't charged, and so the club couldn't issue a statement. I get all of that. It's just that I found it quite difficult to kind of jump on the kind of, oh, what will he bring to the midfield? And isn't that great? It's like, let's make sure that he, hasn't done what he's been accused of first, and then we can talk about it in a footballing context.
Exactly.
Delighted that we can now do that because that's been made official. Good, I'm glad. But also a very good player, and now we can focus on that aspect of it, I guess.
Yeah, no, some excellent recruitment, and as you say, sort of, you don't want to use the statement of intent sort of phrase, but sort of a ruthlessness that I think starting to see come into the way in which Spurs operated, toward the end of last season, holding their nerve. There's a lot of the things you have come to associate with Conte and sort of how he operates. Sort of feels like they're sort of symbolised by a couple of sort of the way in which Spurs have acted in the market really quickly, got these players in. As you mentioned, sort of it's rare to look at a summer and go, oh, we've addressed all the areas. I'm sure there'll be some varying success rates on how well some of these signings do, but
there always are.
But we've addressed all the areas. Yeah, we've addressed all the areas. So that's always a big thing to do. And I've seen, like, it's been hard to miss it, like a lot of coverage around sort of, this intense pre-season, players being sick, like Conte sort of being the PE teacher you all hated in school, who's like screaming at you to do extra laps in cross country or something like that. And, very intense, drills, fitness work in pre-season. I'm not too surprised. Heard about Conte doing that in the past, and he does like his teams to be very, very fit. In terms of, and again, I'm conscious that fans don't lock in fully to pre-season, and I don't know how much of it you've seen, but what have you made of what you have seen so far from pre-season in terms of how you think it's being approached? Does it sort of match what we're talking about here around, it seems to be, a real sort of focus, a real attention on sort of the important things that need to be improved, and then also, what have you seen out of sort of how some of those early tests where the teams thrown on the pitch in different formations and sort of maybe feeling out how players can sort of fill different roles? Obviously, you sort of saw around Lucas Moura recently being tested. Could he be the fabled player to become a wing back in the way in which Victor Moses was transformed? Yeah. How's Richarlison going to dovetail in that front three with Kane and Son, but also having to compete with Kulusevski, but probably going to be on the right now, you'd imagine, for Richarlison. What have you seen in pre-season so far, and sort of what have you anything interesting that you've been able to glean from it? It's obviously always hard to take everything fully seriously.
No, I mean, I don't think I've drawn any conclusions just because I don't care about pre-season. To me also, I'm going to sound so old saying this, but it's a marketing exercise pre-season.
Yeah.
Of course. In so many ways. I don't just mean in the sense of like international tours. It's like, the types of content that clubs release and the kind of the way they sort of impart information, like the physical thing that all players being sick on the sideline. Well, Pochettino worked Spurs just as hard. It wasn't quite as public, and it didn't come with the sort of the natty sound bites with Conte saying, "Oh, I like players to suffer," and that's what pre-season should be. Like it's run hard in difficult climates and huge humidity and oppressive weather and under difficult circumstances. That's the nature of it, I guess. In terms of like the performances on the pitch, I mean, the thing that's funny, like when Richarlison came in, obviously it was kind of Son and Kane. Well, Kulusevski is a better player than Richarlison. On the other side, does more. There are more aspects to his game. He was hugely influential towards the end of last season, and I think that's probably been my only takeaway. Is that sort of even at this early stage, there's a real difference between in Spurs when he's on the pitch and when he's not. We haven't seen Perisic yet because he's had a little bit of an injury. Unfortunately, Bissouma contracted COVID on the way over to South Korea, or he tested positive once they arrived, and so hasn't been able to take part. I think he will be. He's fine, but he had to quarantine, so he's not allowed to train. Him and Fraser Forster. Fraser Forster, not such a devastating miss in pre-season. Like he's the new backup goalkeeper. And Longley hasn't. His paperwork didn't arrive, so we haven't seen him yet. And Jed Spence hasn't been announced. But I suppose the interesting thing is probably in who wasn't part of the preseason.
Right.
So, rather brutally, Tanguy Ndombele, Giovanni Lo Celso, Sergio Reguilon,
Winks
and
as well.
Harry Winks, that's the other one, yes, were left behind because they're all expected to leave the club, or they're being kind of nudged towards the exit door. But Brian Shield wasn't, which is interesting because I think Brian Shield's a super little footballer, but I don't know whether he's a Premier League footballer of the future. And yet he's been part of pre-season. He seems to be very much involved in Conte's plans, at least at this point. So that's been interesting. I suppose. I don't know. Like, it's kind of. I don't want to fall into the kind of the trap of hypocrisy, because I so resented the conclusions drawn from Manchester United against Liverpool. It's just like, I feel like we always get here with Man United and no one ever learns this lesson. It's
the game in Bangkok?
Yeah, right. And it was, and the one with the 20-kilo trophy, which Man United wouldn't take with them because it would have cost too much in luggage. Fair enough, right? Like, if you're organising a pre-season tournament, why would you have a trophy which weighs 20 kilos?
It wasn't as yours, but it was just strange.
Who thought that through? But like, because these are teams which are changing continent every 4 or 5 days, and what we'll do for this incredibly difficult logistical exercise is make it harder. Anyway, so I don't want to be the guy that goes, "Oh, Spurs are going to be," I have no idea, but I feel like, I tend to get through to about October, November, because you always have a little bit of a difficult times in August and September. We have a strange season, obviously, because of the World Cup this year, but I think anytime you've got new signings and like new abilities to weave into your side, you're going to take a little bit of time to see the benefit of them. So as long as they can have a solid enough start, we'll see. But no conclusions. We had Spurs' best ever preseason came before Juan Ramos was sacked for the infamous 2 points from 8 game start. Like, they were amazing in preseason. Everyone lost their mind and we're going to win the league, and they did not win the league. And Juan Ramos got sacked by, I think, the end of October. So ever since then, if there's any Spurs fan alive who tells you that they're tuned into preseason, then you need to give them a little history lesson. But it all seems fine. Look, I think on a more serious note, like, what matters after the last couple of years is that there's no unhappiness. There's no agitation by players wanting to leave. Do you remember how that Kane story dominated last summer, or
of course,
like, the ridiculous search for a manager and like, none of that. That's what I care about during preseason. I want harmony, and I want to have the feeling that things are progressing smoothly and everybody's on the same page and everybody's preparing, and that's been the case this year. So no complaints.
Yeah, I think you touched upon it there about the players who've been left out of the tour, and yeah, interesting that Brian Gill has been given a chance to sort of, I wouldn't say prove himself, but sort of see how he can be a part of Conte's plans. I mean, are there players amongst the ones who are on the tour who you think that this preseason is actually particularly important for them? Maybe in terms of sort of they're going to be facing increased competition now. I'm thinking of players like Højbjerg or players in other positions.
Yeah, Højbjerg's an interesting one because he had a good season. He's not the most popular player in the fan base, but Bentancur is very, very important defensively, also with his passing ability. Not a very progressive player, but his lateral passing ability is excellent. And obviously with Basuma coming in, that is a big signing, and he's going to play, probably. So it's difficult for Højbjerg. I feel like there's a bit of a conversation to happen in defence as well, because, for someone like Ryan Sessegnon had a really good end to the season. He was very, very good at Anfield. Really built on that, seemed to get fit, stay fit. He did the classic thing of posting Instagram videos of himself doing weights and running and, like getting in shape, which is like the modern version of the Rocky montage, isn't it, that every footballer seems to do.
Yeah, Benzema sets the standard, really. And then the rest of
well, actually, I always remember Loris Karius's after the Champions League when he was like, it was of him running up a hill and he was getting ready.
We can rebuild him.
we can rebuild him. We did not rebuild him, but we tried.
It didn't happen. No.
It did not happen, though. So important for Sessegnon. I feel like Sessegnon is really well placed, actually, because Perisic is going to start, but there's a lot of games to play this season, a lot of minutes, and even Perisic at 33 years old, he's not going to play 60 games. And what a great role model to have in your position. I mean, that's fantastic. Like it just to learn from someone that's won the Champions League and won titles in different countries and just like a proper pro. So I think that's great for him to be able to split time. I think very interesting to see what happens with Longley and Davis. I think Davis surprised everybody. I think Davis had arguably the best 6 months of his career at Spurs. Towards the end of last season, he was absolutely outstanding. And had some really, really good games in central defence and really adapted to it well. I know he kind of plays that position for Wales, but not so much at club level, Premier League level. So it's kind of different kettle of fish. So, yeah, but then these are good things because you want competition and you want... I think one of the big problems with Spurs, particularly for the last couple of years under Pochettino, was that first team was just set in stone. Like even... to the point where, he didn't even have a choice to rotate his fullbacks anymore, which was a kind of a hallmark of the early years. Like you had, this guy needs to play or we're in trouble. There were too many of those players. Like, either this guy's fit or there's an issue. Like Kane, Son, yes, but players like Dembele or Christian Eriksen or I suppose like even though he was moving towards the latter stage of his career. Like Toby Alderweireld was like that even before he left the club. Like you needed him to play, and now that isn't quite the case. You've probably got, instead of a first team of like 12 or 13 players, it's probably about 16, 17 now. Like, would you be concerned about playing Ryan Sessegnon instead of even Perisic? Not really. Jed Spencer's there, like, he's an able deputy or competition for Doherty and Emerson Royale if he stays. These are good things. These are good problems. And also, we've talked about Basuma and Højbjerg, but like, okay, so one for the other kind of changes the dynamic of the team, I guess. But is anybody worried about that selection? I don't think so. In the same way that, back in the day, having to, play Jake Livermore instead of Scott Parker or Luka Modric used to be. Like, yeah. It's different. And these are good problems. And also, Spurs are not a rival of Man City and Liverpool. I think they can rival Chelsea this season. They're a long way behind the top two, but I think everybody is. But I think it's kind of they will compete for those kind of instead of it just being a kind of 4th to 7th, it's probably 3rd to 6th this season. Okay. I think they've pulled from like West Ham and stuff, and Man United, who knows, whatever. It will, be the circus that it always is. But I feel like, Spurs have made some ground on Chelsea. They can compete like one-on-one basis, and, games between those, I wouldn't be comfortable picking a winner in the same way that I was last year when I just knew Chelsea was superior in every way for long periods. So it's all good. It's really interesting. I feel good about it.
Yeah, you came onto it anyway, but I was going to ask. I remember seeing a video. I think John McKenzie had done it for Tifo on sort of just how close are Spurs to being able to challenge Liverpool and City, and sort of broke it down to sort of how they've been making sort of their points per season over a period of time, and sort of the areas in which they would need to improve, and sort of the games in which they could pick up those points to shorten the gap. But yeah, it sounds interesting that you're there. You're talking about competing with Chelsea, making ground, trying to solidify that third place, really, or battle for that third place. And as you mentioned, United, the show continues, whatever's going to be happening there. But in that case, I'd say, and just as a final question, and just what have you made of other teams' business? Are there any deals that you really like the look of? You mentioned Gabriel Jesus to Arsenal, sort of an interesting one earlier on. Are there any ones that sort of stood out to you?
Well, I mean, I suppose adding Erling Haaland is not a bad thing, is it, really? If you're Man City.
Yeah. Not too bad.
That's an obvious one. I like Julian Alvarez. We brought him up in a Sensible Transfers podcast over on Tifo about 3 years ago now, when he was just coming through at River Plate, and he was more of it wasn't a deep dive. It was just like, this guy's kind of interesting. Could be something. Didn't know that he'd be a Man City player. I just thought it would be a kind of interesting, and a kind of, he'll crop up somewhere like Sevilla at some point, one of those. I don't know what I think of Liverpool. I'm particularly with Nunes because I'm really torn on him in the sense that I think he's a good player, but I'm a little troubled by how much he spent on him.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know, like I suppose anytime you have a player whose reputation grows exponentially over a very short period of time, I'm a little bit wary. I certainly saw enough of him in the Champions League to think, yeah, good player. I mean, certainly even just in the games against Liverpool. But I just wonder. I suppose it's not really a question over whether he's a good player. It's whether he can suit the system. Just because I think there's a really good little trio there. Like Salah's staying, Jota's there, Diaz is there, Firmino is still there. Like I like that. I mean, I don't necessarily. I mean, you add in like someone like Harvey Elliott potentially to play. I know he's probably an advanced midfielder, but you could play from that right side, I guess. I think Carvalho is a super player. I don't quite know what the plan is in terms of what the pathway is for him, whether he's going to be getting a lot of first minutes, but I saw enough of him to think he's an excellent player.
Yeah.
And that's
he's been
really
great
nice,
in pre-seasons, actually. He's really stood out.
Yeah, well, that's me. Like he's so talented, and I think that's a really nice pickup for you guys. I don't really. I think one of the problems in Liverpool is there isn't a lot to do. Like you're in great shape. The squad, the age profile of a lot of those players is good. Even, you know, I think I've just finished writing a Sensible Transfers episode for TIFO, which is coming out in about 10 days. And we decided not to kind of add anyone at first team level. We kind of just thought, right, here are some sort of younger players who should be on Liverpool's radar over the next 2 or 3 years.
Interesting.
Because there isn't really a deficiency. Do you see what I mean? Like, I mean, you could have better players. I suppose you could replace a Naby Keita with someone who provided you with more stable production. Yes, probably. Is there a problem with Naby Keita? No, I don't think so. I mean, in terms of what he provides and in terms of, is that midfield lacking anything? No, I don't think so. Even at fullback, like I think Tsimikas is a great player.
Yeah, and I like him.
I think I'm full of admiration for what Andy Robertson has achieved. I think Tsimikas might be a better player, technically. I think that's a little bit of a closer contest than it's generally assumed.
I think so.
But he's great. Konate is. I tell you, I remember saying when. The choice between him and yeah. Oh, honestly, by me, it went for the wrong player. Like I think McCartney is a good player. Konate is an excellent one, like a truly outstanding one. That moment in the I forget who it was. I think it might have been Vinicius. When Vinicius cut inside him in the Champions League final, and you just thought Vinicius is amongst the quickest wingers in world football, particularly with the ball at his feet. And you saw Konate eat up the ground to just take it away from him. It's extraordinary to play.
He was really great that day.
He's just, I think, and also, given his lack of experience and given his age, can you imagine what he'd be in 2 or 3 years' time? Like, you know, injuries aside, all that kind of stuff. Like, playing alongside Van Dijk, having those abilities and that potential, that's about as good a platform as you could possibly ask for. Great.
Interesting to see Gomez decide to sign on as well, right? That's you forget just how young he is as well. But yeah, I think he's must have been assured that he's going to get more of a look in, and because at that age, I suppose you are at a little bit of a crossroads as to do I need more first team football? Because I actually think he's probably one of England's most talented centre backs, to be honest.
I agree. I agree.
Just doesn't get a look.
If he stay fit, I think he'd start for England. Like if he'd stay fit, like Liverpool probably wouldn't have signed a couple of the players in his position. So I feel a little bit sorry for Joe Gomez. I mean, I just, more than anything else, he just wanted to stay fit. It's just a horrible thing for a footballer not to be able to play. I was a little bit surprised you let Nico Williams leave. But then for that kind of money, that's just absurd. I mean, well done, but you just can't. You can't pay nearly £20 million for a player who, you know, he's a good player, but it's still surrounded by quite a lot of uncertainty, just because there's no guarantees that if you're a Nottingham Forest, that you can get £20 million worth of return out of something like that, or 17 million or whatever it was. But also, that's probably the only area where there's a sort of an issue. Like if Trent Alexander-Arnold was to get injured, that's a problem.
Yeah.
I would have thought. I don't know.
Yeah, I imagine it's going to be. I imagine that's going to be earmarked for Gomez for a little bit, which I sort of feel a way about. But yeah, Gomez dovetails there. Actually, last season I was like very surprised by the quality of Joe Gomez's crossing. I think he's probably been drilled on like, okay, if this is where I'm going to get my minutes, I need to be able to whip in a cross. And he's been pretty good in there. And obviously there's Callum Ramsey, but I don't imagine he'll be getting too.
Oh, I've completely forgotten about Calvin Ramsey.
Calvin Ramsey, sorry.
It's Calvin.
Yeah.
No, so I completely forgot about him. Yeah, he's there at right back, isn't he?
So
it all looks great. Yeah, like I suppose elsewhere, City fine, City. Chelsea, don't know, because I felt like they needed a central midfielder. I think Kante's best days are gone, and I think Jorginho, that little spike in popularity that Jorginho enjoyed around the European Championship, I think that's ebbed away a little bit, because he's gone back to just being Jorginho again. Good player, not an outstanding one. Man United, it's just nonsense. I think, like,
Eriksen. Yeah, that's a weird one.
Well, I'm happy with Eriksen. I think he could have. I actually, financially, it's obviously the right decision, because no one's going to offer him that kind of money or those years. I just feel from a footballing perspective, he'd been better off at Brentford. He was so well. Like, he was central to things. At Man United, like, the fear is that, and this is really based on my affection for Christian Eriksen. You don't want to see him getting lost within a bad system and just having to see out his days in a kind of muddle of a midfield, because it's so many good players have suffered this.
He could end up like Juan Mata, couldn't he? Really?
Yeah, but Man United ruin players. Like, they take away players that I really enjoy watching. So Jadon Sancho, when people talk about Bundesliga tax, nonsense. Man United tax.
Yeah.
Like, it's a kind of, you take players away and you don't surround them with the right components. You don't put them in the right place in the system, and you just think that by spending the money and paying the wages, you're going to get performance. And you just think that's not how it works. If you look at where these players have come from.
I mean, there's the slow moving car crash of the Frankie de Jong.
I don't even know what to say about that. It's kind of
feels really sad.
It's just so boring, Harry. Yeah. It's so boring. It's just. I also I feel a little bit sorry for Frankie de Jong in the sense that he does not want to play for Man United.
No.
He wants to stay at Barcelona. He's owed an awful lot of money by Barcelona, and somehow he's being obliged to leave like 14 million euros on the table. It's like, on the contract. Like, at the same time, like, imagine being Frankie de Jong this summer and watching them signing Rodrigo and
Lewandowski and Rafinha and
Andreas Christensen. It's just like, do you know what? Stop buying players. Stop it. Just you don't need it. You have this wonderful little group of sort of Gavi and Pedri and Ansu Fati, and it's fun to watch. And there's a couple of others underneath, like Alex Balde and people like that, and Nico as well. And yeah, still, it's like a compulsion, isn't it? It's like, oh no, we have to we're going to sell off 10% of our TV rights so that we can sign Andreas Christensen. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And obviously, I live in Germany, and the coverage of the Lewandowski affair has been almost total. And I just can't believe that Bayern Munich have sold a 33-year-old with 1 year left in his contract who didn't want to play for them to a club who have no money for nearly 50 million euros. It's extraordinary. Great player.
I think the issue with the transfer has been that I don't think they believe it either. Even though it's gone through, I'm not sure they're actually fully confident they're going to get this.
It's amazing. It's because kind of like, that's the kind of player that you happily pay the wages. Because you add quality and you might get another 2 really good years from him. But you're talking 50 million euros and there's no resale value. So the whole thing is just dead weight loss.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, I know that not everything has to be placed within a kind of Johan Cruyff context, but I just don't see Lewandowski as that kind of player. Like, I see him as the best penalty box finisher in world football. And I don't know. Like, I'm interested. I mean, I'm looking forward to watching. It's just, if you imagine you're Bayern Munich and you sell him for 20 million more than you get Sadio Mane for, and you've added Mazraoui, Gravenberch, and probably Matthias de Ligt. Well done.
Yeah, fascinated by that, how that de Ligt, that de Ligt transfer will go, because I think he's another one who could do with a little bit of a rehabilitation. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But anyway, Seb, thanks. I mean, we found a lot to talk about, despite the fact that it feels like football's only been
hey, the Zweite Bundesliga in Germany started yesterday, or started on Friday night. It's back now. It's middle of July. So I live in Hamburg, and we got 2 teams. So the football season started.
Yeah,
crazy.
I know. I'm in denial.
Roasting hot outside, and it's football, and everyone's supposed to still be on their holidays, and here we go.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to accept it sooner rather than later. Certainly, because I'm gonna be doing these podcasts. So, but as always, pleasure to speak with you, and I think good of all the conversations we've had actually around probably the most positive one we've had actually around sort of where
season hasn't started yet.
So that's why. This is true.
Catch me in like October.
This is true. But just before I do let you go, because I obviously caught you mentioning it there, the sensible transfers piece that you'd done with Tifo for Liverpool. Is there anything that you wanted to plug?
Well, no, but you mentioned obviously over at Tifo we've added John McKenzie.
Yes,
John's come in and he's doing a fantastic job.
Friend of the pod. Yeah.
So. Great guy, great addition for Tifo, real coup for us. And some of the stuff that he's doing over on the RL channel is great. So keep an eye on that. And the Illustrator channel, Sensible Transfers will be, I think next Wednesday. I think I'd have to look at my schedule, but either Wednesday or Friday of next week. So. And then throughout the season, we'll be doing quite a bit of World Cup stuff. So we're looking at some of the kind of the social bits and, some of the logistical issues and the range of challenges in every sense that the Qatar World Cup presents. So we'll be covering that between now and the beginning of the tournament.
Yeah, I think that's well put. I think on that. And just to all those who are listening, thank you for sort of tuning in. It's going to be sort of this little mini pre-season series we're doing here on Anfield Index Pro, just looking at the top four teams and sort of discussing the shape in which we find them in, or the 3 of them anyway. So next we'll be covering Chelsea and seeing what shape they're in as they tour LA. There's been some great photos. We'll obviously discuss Sterling, we'll discuss Koulibaly and more, but do keep your eyes peeled for that. That should be out in the next week or so.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.